Good morning to each and everyone. Today, we are going to tackle about the educational and communication approaches in deaf education, together with my group mates, Kembo, Rica Plaza, Waskin, and Ligado. So the objective of this lesson is at the end of this lesson, students will be able to know what are the educational and communication approaches in deaf education. Second, students will identify the characteristics of quality oral education program. Next, a student will determine the differences and similarities of mainstream and residential school. And lastly, student will learn the basic American Sign Language. So without further ado, let's start. So is the one who will discuss the auditory oral approach.
Oral or oral. Many families choose an oral or oral approach for their children as they are hearing themselves. With support from their local services, their children access mainstream preschool settings and develop natural speech through learning to listen. Early intervention. Professionals and the family working together and the consistent use of the appropriate technology play a key part. There are several organizations who advocate their own specific oral approach to communication. The oral approach to communication relies solely on a deaf child's use of speech. Sign language is not used with a child and there is an emphasis on lip reading. Here, a child is taught to speak well enough to communicate confidently and accurately through speech methods. Oral communication can be taught in various ways, using various methods depending on the program. However, regardless of the program, oral programs capitalize the child's hearing to the maximum extent possible for teaching spoken language. Using different techniques, instructions is designed to accelerate the child's ability to acquire spoken language throughout the day. Major factors that have influenced oral education are early identification of hearing loss as a result of universal newborn screening, early intervention, improved technology of both hearing aids and cochlear implants, and improved teaching that capitalizes on the first three factors. Squartz 2007. How does oral education works? Teachers listen carefully to what the student says so they can help them speak better. During various activities, the teacher capitalizes on teachable moments to help children improve the quality of the student's language and speech. The teacher listens not only to what the student says, but also to how the student says it and then figures out a way to help the student say it better. The teacher models an improved version of the student's utterance using different techniques. Getting the student to imitate the teacher's model can improve or provide practice in producing longer, more complete, more correct, or more complex utterances. What are the characteristics of quality of oral education? The program goal is for children to talk well enough to communicate efficiently by talking. It emphasizes developing a child's auditory comprehension by providing maximum access to sound through well-fitted hearing aids or cochlear implants. No sign language is used. Children are immersed in spoken language throughout the day. Programs are both family-centered and child-centered. Parents are considered a critical support in ensuring their child's success in developing spoken language. Teachers are knowledgeable about and trained in accelerating spoken language development in children with hearing loss. Classes are small and allow for individualized instruction. Acoustic of the classroom are designed to provide a quiet listening environment. So this type of program or oral education is more into teaching students how to speak. They use more of the technology like the hearing aid or the cochlear implants. And sign language is or they did not use sign language more in this type of education.
Hello everyone, I'm Mary Grace D. Kimbo and I will tackle about the auditory verbal approach and auditory training. First is, what does auditory verbal approach mean? This approach means to guide or help children with hearing loss to cope up with their disability in order to live their own lives to the fullest. So, next is the purpose of the auditory verbal approach. So first, its main purpose is to teach children on how to use hearing aids and implants so that they can understand what they are saying and how they talk toward others. Next is the aim. So it aims to guide children with hearing loss to use their hearing capacity through the use of hearing aid or implants so that they can respond or talk to others through their own hearings. Lastly is the objective, is to give children with hearing loss an equal status in our society so that they can survive and be independent in this harsh world. So the benefits of auditory verbal approach can make an impact for children with hearing loss since they are developing their speech and language skills in order to make them have an equal opportunities just like other normal children. So next is the auditory training. So what is auditory training? It is an intervention that is solely aims to help individuals who have hearing loss and give out support in order for them to improve their skills and speech understanding. So the purpose and the benefits of the auditory training. First, its purpose is to make children recognize and interpret sounds even though their sense of hearing has a limited capabilities. Next is the benefits of this training will greatly affect on how a child fully maximizes the use of his or her hearing aids because he or she will have experiences of noisy environment that will hinder their understanding of speeches with other people.
Lips reading is a technique of understanding speech by visual interpreting the movement of lips, face, and tongue when normal sound is not available. It relies also on information provided by context, knowledge of the language, and any residual hearing. Children and adults often use speech reading in combination with other building blocks, such as auditory training, cued speech, and others. But it can be successful alone. Babies will naturally begin using this building block if they can see the speaker's mouth and face. But as a child gets older, he or she still needs some training to use this building block. And for the cued speech, visual mode of communication in which mouth movement of spoken language combined with cues to make sounds or phonemes of traditional spoken language look different. Cueing allows users who are deaf, hard of hearing, or who have language communication disorder to access the basic fundamental properties of spoken language through the use of vision. When watching a person's mouth, many speech look the same on the face even though the sounds heard are not the same. For instance, the words mat, bat, pat look the same on the face even though the sound is very different. Basically, a person cues the sound or phonemes of spoken language by using its distinct hand gesture or hand shape in any one of 4 distinct locations near the mouth. By the way, the hand shape represents consonant phonemes and the location near the mouth represent vowel phonemes. Then, cue consonant or vowel chunk in synchronization with the mouth movement of speech. With or without hearing any sound at all, the deaf or hard-hearing person sees exactly what is being said. Cued speech does not require the use of hearing or the use of speech. It only required that the user show the mouth movement that match the cues. And for the benefits, the child is able to internalize a phonemic model of language naturally in much the same way as hearing child does. Yes, that's right, since cued speech provide 100% visual access to the sound of spoken language. This provide the language base of phonemic awareness that support the development of literacy, reading, and writing. Deaf children who use cued speech generally attain English language and literacy levels equal or better than to those hearing peers. The use of cued speech can be used to support the development of speech skills. It's because cued speech is phonetically based. The deaf is completely aware of all the sounds that make up each word, which support the articulation process. However, speaking is not required by the cued speech user. Since cued speech is around the mouth, it does support the acquisition of lip reading skills, and many cued speech users develop strong lip reading abilities. And for the cued speech and American Sign Language or ASL, 95% of children who are deaf or hard of hearing are born of hearing parents. If the parents choose to learn a whole new language, typically American Sign Language or ASL, or another sign language, the child will only acquire language as quickly the parents are able to learn to sign. In contrast, cued speech is a visual code for transmitting spoken language. It can be learned in less than 20 hours of instruction and has a finite set of hand shapes, locations to be used with any word. Parents are able to fully communicate with their children in their own native language almost immediately. If a deaf child is born to a family where the parents are also deaf and ASL is the native language of the family, the child will most likely learn ASL as his primary language and could learn English as second language via use of cued speech. Likewise, a deaf child who learns English via cued speech as his first language may learn ASL as a second language. This is desirable so that the child is able to socialize with other deaf individuals who sign. For families wish to bilingual in English and ASL, cued speech provide an effective tool of developing English proficiency, freeing ASL to use for sign communication in its purest form. Many Q kids learn ASL by their 10 years. They generally prefer English for academics and communication with hearing people and ASL for communication with others who are deaf. Cued speech and cochlear implant. According to student published in 2010, cued speech improved speech perception, speech reading abilities, and first language development for children with cochlear implant. Cued speech can be used before implant to lay the foundation for language. Cued speech can be used after an implant as a supplement until the implant is fully functional, and as a backup system in noise or when the implant is not being used or malfunctioning. Cued speech and cochlear implant are perfectly partner. And for the cued speech and literacy, delayed acquisition of language caused by hearing often hamper the ability to learn to read. As a result, many deaf adults can struggle with reading and writing proficiently. Huge speech facilities the achievement of individual full potential for literacy. And for the result of research studies have consistently showed that native deaf cures with no additional learning or processing difficulties have achieved literacy levels comparable or beyond their hearing peers. The students that focus on deaf cueing children aged 7 to 16 have shown that them to score higher than deaf signing and oral peers on several standardized reading and writing tests. Total communication. We all need to feel connected, and yet we all connected differently. That's why at SINS, we use the total communication approach that supports people to connect in the right way for each individuals. So what is total communication? Total communication approach is about finding and using right combination of communication method for each person. This approach helps an individual to form connection, ensure successful interaction, and support information exchanges and conversation. A combination of method is used which reinforce each other and strengthen meaning for the individual. By using this approach, we make a complicated simple and empower people to communicate and express themselves, be it through speech or sign, touch or movement, gesture or sound, art or dance. So there are two types of language skills, which are the expressive communication and receptive communication. So expressive communication is when you are sending message. This may respond to another person to initiate communication. And for the receptive communication is when you receive a message from another person. So an individual expressive and receptive communication skill may not be the same. People will use a combination of the communication method listed above, both expressively and receptively. For example, person may receive and understand information in sign language and need symbol to help reinforce the meaning, but will use sign language and speech to express themselves. Since the total communication approach values and uses of all methods of communication so that everyone we support can communicate, understand, and be understood. And that's all for total communication. For the next topic, let's go on Julina.
Thank you, Rica Plaza. So now let's move on to our next topic, which is the bilingual or bicultural or bye-bye. So the word bilingual means being able to speak two languages, and the word bicultural means being part of two communities or two cultures. So as you observe in the screen, in the right side you can see the bilingual, and in the left side is the bicultural. So first is the bilingual. So children learn American Sign Language as a first language. They learn ASL as their main way of communicating with other people. The second is they learn English as a second language. So spoken English is very hard to learn because they can't hear. Since they learn by seeing, American Sign Language is best for them. So once they learn one language, they can pick up other languages more easily. So next is bicultural. So first, children learn about and become part of deaf culture and the deaf community. So as I remember, there is a group that already discussed the deaf culture, but let me explain it again to you. So deaf culture is made up of people who share the same values and language. So they may also share some of the same experiences. Deaf culture has its own history and stories and art. And in deaf community, is made up of different kinds of people. Its members are mostly deaf or or hard of hearing. So they come from different backgrounds and are of different races. So they've lost their hearing at the different ages for different reasons. So next is they are also still part of their family's culture and their family's community. So in addition to that, but the bilingual bicultural model provides a deaf students with a complete access to a natural language that they can acquire as hearing children do a spoken language. So in addition, advances were made in the technology of restoring hearing ability, such as cochlear implants, and though they were controversial, they have a particular appeal to hearing parents of deaf children. So, the development of such technology and the placement of many deaf children in regular schools promised to pose challenges regarding to the use of ESL as an instructional approach. So next is So the next topic is the American Sign Language or ASL. So American Sign Language, this is the a communication approach to in deaf education. So when we say American Sign Language, this is a visual spatial language that uses hand gestures, hand shapes to communicate in the deaf community. So as we all know, Madam R already teach us about the basic ASL signs, the alphabetical letters, the colors, the numbers. So that's one of the basic ASL or American Sign Language. So in American Sign Language, there is a what we call the sign space. So when we say sign space, this refers to the area in which most signs are made in normal conversation. Signing outside the sign space is uncomfortable on your hands, wrists, and shoulders. Generally, most signs are centered the right left of your middle torso. And if you're signing space is the overall space that includes the top of your head down to your hips and across both shoulders. So when we say sign space, this is a person. When a person signing space is from the top of the head to the waistline, you do not want to sign so large that people have a hard time following your hands and the conversation. So visualize a picture in front of you. Just visualize a picture frame in front of you and keep your signs within that frame. So now let's proceed to the 5 parameters of American Sign Language. So first is the hand shape. So the hand shape is the shape of your hand that is used to create a sign. So this is the sign of infections. This is also the sign for insurance. But this is the sign of emergency. Did you see the difference? So I went from this to this. The movement is the same, the location is the same, but the only difference is the hand shape. Another example is this. This is the sign for college. This is the sign for university. So the movement is the same, the location is the same, but the difference is the hand shape. So I went from a flat hand for college to a U hand for university. The second is the location. When we say location, it is the location of your sign on your body. So I'm gonna give you a few examples, but the only thing that is different is where did I do the sign. So first is the mother. This is the sign of the mother. This is the sign of the father. This is the sign of a grandmother. This is the sign of a grandfather. So the movement is the same, the hand shape is the same, The only difference is the location. So another example is this. This is the sign of curious. This is the sign of soon. So again, the movement is the same, the hand shape is the same, the only difference is the location. So the third one is the palm orientation. So when we say palm orientation, this is the position of your palm of your hands and the direction they are facing. So this is an example of palm orientation. So this is letter K, and as you observe, my hands or my palm is facing outward. So when I do this one, so it changed. So from letter K, then it turns out to letter P. So that's the example of palm orientation. So the fourth one is the movement. So when we say movement, it is the action that is used to create a sign. So I will use a hand shape of letter H. So I have three examples. The hard of hearing, and the history. So in history, this is a sign of history. In hard of hearing, this is a sign of hard hearing. And in hurry, this is a sign of hurry. So as you observe, the hand shape is the same, but the movement is, there is a movement, as you can see, from a history and the hard of hearing, from this to this, and the hurry is like that. So as you observe, there is a movement. So and the last parameters is the non-manual signals, which is, what is manual signals? It is a facial expressions. The body movements are added in signs to create a meaning. So I have here two examples. All parameters are identical except the facial expression. So first is the not yet, which is this one. This is the sign of not yet. Next is the late. So as you observe, when I sign the not yet, my mouth is open, and you can see my tongue also. When I sign the late, my mouth is closed. So as you observe, the movement, the hand shape is the same. So the only difference is my facial expression. So it's really important to have a facial expression in doing American Sign Language, because it easily to make the deaf or hard of hearing learners to understand what did you say to them, or what did you sign.
So good day, everyone. My report for today is mainstreaming. Mainstreaming is the context of education, is the practice of placing students with special education service in a general education classroom during
So
specific
that's all
time
about our
period
report,
based
which
on their
is the
skills.
educational and
So when we say
communication approach in
mainstreaming,
deaf education.
all
So I hope you learned
because
something
all
today.
children deserve an equal
Please
chance
answer,
at an
and we
education.
already
When a
prepared
children
the
with
activity,
hearing loss
so
goes to a
please answer
public
it
school
immediately.
instead
So
of
thank you so
school
much
for
for
deaf.
lending your time.
Mainstreaming is the
and
practice of
have a good
educating
day.
students with special needs in a regular classes during specific time periods based on their individual skills. The mainstreaming model began to be used as a result of the requirement to place children in the least restrictive environment. So, the example of mainstreaming, a mainstreaming school is a public school that children with loss of hearing can go to. They have classes with hearing children. They might need special service such as interpreters, note takers, or speech therapies to help them understand what is going on in a class. So, next is what is the difference between mainstreaming and inclusion in special education? When we say mainstreaming, refers to the children with an IEP attending a regular classroom for the social and academic benefit. These students are expected to learn the same materials as the rest of the class, but with modification in the course and adjustment in the assessment. So, inclusion refers to the children with an IAP attending a regular classroom for their social and academic benefit. But these children are not expected to learn the same materials as the rest of the class. So, the difference of the mainstreaming and inclusion is the student in mainstreaming, they are expected to learn the same materials as the rest of the class, but in inclusion setting, they are not expected to learn the same material as the rest of the class, unlike the mainstreaming. So, what is the goal of mainstreaming? The primary purpose of mainstreaming is to include students with disability with the traditional classroom while giving them the same opportunities as other students to access instruction, gain knowledge, grow as an individual, and to participate in the academic and socializing environment that a classroom has to offer. In mainstreaming, they want to include students with disabilities into a traditional classroom. They want that the students with special needs try to be part in a traditional classroom because they deserve an equal education. So next is residential school. When we say residential school, by contrast, residential school enrolls special needs children for 24 hours a day, and they are usually attended by those who cannot obtain service in their community. So, a residential school, this is a kind of school that was specially made for deaf and hearing impaired children. An example of this is a residential school that is just for the deaf and hard of hearing. The lessons are made just for deaf students, and all of the teacher and staff are trained to work with deaf and hard of hearing children. The students live on the campus for the most part, but are allowed to go their families during the weekend and holiday. So next is, what does a residential school provided? A residential school programs are designed to educate the whole children, academically, social, vocational, and more, so that he or she can live life as full as possible. Like any residential school setting, your children will pass many milestones and reach many benchmarks while living away from you. So, that's the residential school provide. So, what is the difference between residential and mainstream school? Mainstream school teach in English. They speak and they are not many accommodations for deaf or hard of hearing kids. Residential schools for deaf go much more on detail about deaf cultures. The lessons are taught in ASL, and deaf culture is a large part of school itself. So, in the mainstream, they are they going to teach the English. They only speak it. But in the residential school, they are more on doing sign language. They are more tackled about the deaf culture, not unlike in mainstream. Because the mainstream, the mainstream school is is a a public school, but a residential school are for only deaf students. So the similarities between residential and mainstream school, okay, although mainstream and residential are different school programs, there are some similarities. For example, both mainstream and residential are school programs for deaf and hard of hearing children to go. Also, both types of school teach the children what they are required to learn, but just not in the same language. So that's all for my report, and thank you.
So that's all about our report, which is the educational and communication approach in deaf education. So I hope you learned something today. Please answer, and we already prepared the activity, so please answer it immediately. So thank you so much for lending your time and have a great day.